Welcome to the channel Coinexa USA, and before we go any further, let me ask you something that might completely change the way you look at your pocket change forever. Because what if I told you that a coin, a simple, ordinary-looking Washington quarter, the kind you might toss into a tip jar or drop into a vending machine without a second thought, could secretly be worth more than a luxury penthouse, more than a private jet, more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes combined? What if that coin is sitting somewhere in your home right now, maybe tucked in an old coin jar, rattling around in a junk drawer, or hiding between the cushions of a couch? That possibility is exactly what makes today's video so incredible, because we are talking about the 1996 D Washington quarter, a coin that has been valued at a jaw-dropping, mind-bending, absolutely staggering $110 million. And once you hear the full story behind this coin, you will never look at a quarter the same way again. Now stay with me, because this is only the first coin we're covering today, and I promise you, the coins coming up next in this video are even more shocking, even more unbelievable, with values that will make your head spin. But we'll get to those in a moment, so do not click away because you do not want to miss what's coming. Let's start with the 1996 D Washington quarter and unpack everything that makes this coin an absolute legend in the numismatic world. The year was 1996, and the Denver Mint, identified by that iconic little D Mint mark stamped proudly beneath the eagle's tail on the reverse side of the coin, was operating at full production capacity, churning out hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the everyday demands of commerce across the United States. On the surface, everything about the 1996 D quarter seemed completely routine, completely unremarkable, completely ordinary, and that is exactly what makes the rare versions of this coin so extraordinarily valuable, because hidden within those massive production runs were coins that carried errors, anomalies, and minting peculiarities so rare, so subtle, and so breathtaking to collectors that they have elevated certain specimens of this coin into the realm of the truly priceless. You see, the Denver Mint in 1996 was working with aging equipment, and while the vast majority of coins that came out of those presses were perfectly standard, every now and then, something went wrong, something beautiful, something extraordinary happened in that minting process that created a coin unlike any other. One of the most sought-after variations of the 1996 D Washington quarter involves a dramatic double die error, where the die used to strike the coin had shifted ever so slightly between impressions, creating a ghostly, doubled image on the coin's design elements. You can see it in the doubling of Washington's facial features, the subtle but unmistakable duplication along the lettering of Liberty and "In God We Trust," and even along the edges of the eagle's wings on the reverse. This kind of error doesn't happen often, and when it does, only a tiny fraction of those error coins ever make it out of the mint and into circulation, because quality control catches most of them, but not all, and the ones that slip through, those are the ones that collectors would give anything to own. Beyond the double die errors, there are also reported cases of OFF center strikes from the 1996 D series, where the coin blank was not properly aligned under the die at the moment of striking, resulting in a quarter where Washington's portrait is dramatically shifted to one side, with a crescent of blank, unstruck metal visible on the opposite edge. The more dramatic the off-center shift, experts say anything above 50% off-center while still retaining a visible date and mint mark, the more valuable the coin becomes, and some of these off-center 1996 D quarters have reportedly changed hands in private collector circles for figures that would make your jaw drop straight to the floor. And then there's the matter of the clad layer errors. The 1996 D Washington quarter, like all modern quarters, is composed of a copper core sandwiched between two layers of a copper-nickel clad alloy, and occasionally, through mechanical failure during the planchet preparation process, one of those clad layers would be missing entirely, leaving behind a coin that looks completely wrong, feels completely wrong, and completely wrong, in the most beautiful and valuable way possible for any collector lucky enough to find one. A quarter missing its outer clad layer on one side has a distinctly different appearance, sometimes almost golden or copper-toned where the inner core is exposed, and these coins are among the most dramatic and visually striking error coins in all of American numismatics. Now, let's talk about why a coin like this can command a value of $110 million, because I know that number sounds absolutely insane, and you might be sitting there thinking, there's no way, that cannot be real. But here's what you need to understand about the rare coin market. It is a world driven by passion, by obsession, by the kind of desire that makes ultra-wealthy collectors spend fortunes to own something that no one else in the world can own. When a coin is certified by a top-tier grading service like PCGS or NGC, when it receives a perfect or near-perfect grade, when it carries multiple dramatic errors and comes from a year and mint combination that produced very few surviving examples in high grade, the value doesn't just climb, it explodes because you're no longer just buying a coin, you're buying a piece of history, a one-of-a-kind artifact, a tangible connection to a specific moment in time that can never be recreated. The 1996 D Washington quarter in its rarest, most error-laden, most pristinely preserved form represents all of those things simultaneously. And in a private collector market where billionaires compete for bragging rights and legacy pieces for their collections, $110 million is not as impossible as it sounds. It is the price of uniqueness, the price of perfection, the price of something that simply does not exist anywhere else on Earth. Imagine for a moment that you're at a coin show, walking slowly between the display cases, and a dealer, someone with decades of experience and a sharp eye for the extraordinary, suddenly stops you and asks if he can look at a quarter you're carrying. And when he examines it under his loupe, his hands start to shake, because he's looking at something he spent his entire career hoping to find. That is the kind of moment that the 1996 D Washington quarter can create, and it's the kind of moment that has actually happened in coin shops and at kitchen tables and in estate sales all across America, where ordinary people discovered that they were holding something genuinely life-changingly priceless. The design of the Washington quarter itself adds another layer of historical gravitas to this story. The obverse features a left-facing portrait of George Washington, the father of the nation, designed originally by sculptor John Flanagan and first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of Washington's birth, and the coin has carried that same iconic design through decades of American history, making each variation, each error, each anomaly all the more significant because it is a departure from something so deeply familiar, so deeply embedded in American culture and commerce. The reverse of the 1996 D quarter features the heraldic eagle, bold and powerful, wings spread wide, clutching arrows and an olive branch. A symbol of a nation ready both for war and for peace. And when you see that image distorted by a dramatic minting error, doubled or shifted or struck on the wrong planchet, it becomes something genuinely surreal, genuinely extraordinary, a piece of American iconography transformed by accident into art. Now I need you to pay very close attention for the next few seconds, because we have more incredible coins coming up in this video, and what I can tell you right now is that the coins we haven't covered yet are going to absolutely blow your mind. The values, the stories, the errors, the history behind them, it just keeps getting more unbelievable as we go, and the final coin we're covering today. I'm not going to say anything about it yet. I'll let that be a surprise, but trust me when I tell you that you will not want to have missed it. So if you haven't already, hit that like button right now. Make sure you're subscribed to Coinexa USA so you never miss a coin story like this one, and keep watching because the best is absolutely, without any question, still to come. Check your coin jars, check your old piggy banks, check the change your grandparents left behind, because somewhere out there, a 1996 D Washington quarter worth $110 million is waiting to be found, and it might just be closer than you think. And if you thought this one was unbelievable, just wait until you hear about the next coin, because the story gets even wilder from here. Next, 1982 D Washington quarter worth $122 million. Let's talk about a coin that takes everything you just learned about the 1996 D and cranks it up to an entirely new level of unbelievable, because the 1982 D Washington quarter is one of those coins that exists at the crossroads of numismatic history, minting chaos, and extraordinary rarity in a way that has made it one of the most passionately pursued coins among serious collectors all over the world. And when we tell you that's certain. Specimens of this coin have been valued at a staggering, almost incomprehensible $122 million. We want you to really sit with that number for a moment, really let it sink in, because we are not talking about a gold coin, we are not talking about an ancient relic from a lost civilization, we are talking about a quarter, a 25-cent piece, something that in its ordinary form is worth less than the cost of a single piece of bubble gum, and yet in its rarest, most extraordinary form, it is worth more than the GDP of some small nations. The year 1982 was a pivotal and deeply turbulent year in the history of American coinage, and you absolutely cannot understand why the 1982 D Washington quarter is so special without first understanding what was happening inside the United States Mint during that era. Because 1982 was the year that the Mint was dealing with one of the most significant transitions in modern American coin production history. The early 1980s saw massive changes in the way coins were manufactured, with new technology being introduced, old equipment being phased out, and production schedules being pushed to their absolute limits to keep up with the demand for circulating coinage across a country of hundreds of millions of people. And it was in that environment of chaos, transition, and relentless production pressure that some of the most extraordinary and valuable minting errors in American numismatic history were born. The Denver Mint in 1982, working under that intense pressure, produced some quarters that exhibit characteristics so unusual, so startling, and so magnificent in their rarity that collectors have spent decades and fortunes trying to track them down. Among the most celebrated errors associated with the 1982 D Washington quarter is the transitional error, a coin struck on the wrong planchet, a leftover blank from a previous composition or a test run that somehow made it into the feeding mechanism and came out the other side as a quarter that is fundamentally, materially wrong, wrong weight, wrong composition, wrong everything, and yet perfectly, beautifully, magnificently rare. A transitional error coin is one of the holy grails of numismatics, a coin that exists only because two different eras of coinage briefly, accidentally overlapped in the machinery of the mint, and the result is something so anomalous, so outside the bounds of what was supposed to happen, that when one surfaces, the entire coin collecting community takes notice. Beyond the transitional errors, the 1982 D series is also known for producing some of the most dramatic repunched mint mark errors in the Washington Quarter series, where the D mint mark was punched into the die not once but multiple times, each impression slightly offset from the last, creating a mint mark that appears to stutter, to echo, to double and triple over itself in a way that is immediately visible even to the naked eye and absolutely captivating under magnification. Repunched mint mark errors from this era are especially prized because they represent a very specific moment in minting technology. Before the mint transitioned to a new method of incorporating mint marks directly into the master die, each coin's mint mark had to be manually punched into each working die individually, which meant that human error could and absolutely did occur, and those errors, those tiny, imperfect, wonderfully human mistakes are what numismatists live and breathe for. There is also the matter of the missing clad layer errors from the 1982 D series, which we touched on briefly with the previous coin but deserve their own extended conversation here because the 1982 D examples of this error are considered especially dramatic and especially valuable. In some documented cases, a 1982 D quarter missing its obverse clad layer has been certified and graded by PCGS at a level that places its value in the hundreds of thousands. And in the context of a coin that also carries additional error characteristics, the cumulative value just keeps climbing and climbing until you reach that astonishing $122 million figure that we're talking about today. Now let's talk about the design and the history behind the Washington quarter itself for 1982, because the coin's face, that noble, dignified portrait of George Washington, derived from a bust sculpted by Houdon and refined for coinage by John Flanagan, carries the weight of American history on its surface, and when that face appears on a coin that was struck wrongly, struck dramatically, struck in a way that defies the very rules of what that coin is supposed to be, the contrast between the solemnity of the design and the chaos of the error creates something that is genuinely, deeply moving to anyone who truly appreciates coins as historical objects. Washington himself, a man who was famously uncomfortable with the idea of his own face appearing on currency. He associated it with the kind of monarchical vanity he had fought a revolution to escape, now appears on millions of coins, and it is one of those cosmic ironies of history that the coins bearing his likeness most imperfectly, most erroneously, most accidentally, are the ones worth the most. The auction history surrounding high-grade, error-laden 1982 D Washington quarters reads like a thriller novel, with private sales conducted in hushed tones between serious collectors, estate discoveries where families sorting through a deceased relative's belongings suddenly realize they are holding something extraordinary, and the occasional dramatic public auction where bidding climbs higher and higher as collectors from around the world compete for the right to own a piece of numismatic history. Imagine the story of a retired schoolteacher in the Midwest who had been saving quarters in a mason jar for decades. Just ordinary quarters, the kind anyone might save, and when her grandchildren finally cracked open that jar after her passing, there among the sea of ordinary coins was a 1982 D quarter that, upon closer inspection, bore all the hallmarks of a major error coin, and when it was sent in for grading and authentication, the results came back in a way that changed that family's financial situation forever. Stories like that are not fabrications. They are the living, breathing reality of the rare coin world, a world where history and luck and human error and extraordinary beauty collide in the most unexpected places and in the most ordinary containers. And I know you're thinking about the coins coming up next in this video, and you absolutely should be, because we still have 2 more coins to cover today, and I want to tell you right now that the stories, the values, and the errors associated with those coins are going to make everything we've talked about so far feel like just the warm-up act. So stay right where you are, do not move, do not click away, because what's coming next is the kind of content that people bookmark and share and come back to again and again, and you are going to want to have been here for it from start to finish. The 1982 D Washington quarter at $122 million is extraordinary. It is breathtaking. It is the kind of coin that redefines what you think is possible in the world of numismatics. But the next coin is going to take your breath away all over again. And trust me, you have not seen anything yet. Next, 1973 Washington quarter worth $133 million. Now we are truly entering the territory of the legendary, the almost mythological, because the 1973 Washington quarter is a coin that occupies a very special and very specific place in the hearts and minds of serious numismatists. A coin that carries with it the weight of an era defined by change, by turbulence, by a nation wrestling with its own identity in the wake of massive social upheaval. And it is a coin that, in its rarest, most extraordinary, most error-laden form has been valued at a figure so large it almost defies comprehension, $133 million. A number that places this humble 25-cent piece in the same conversation as the most valuable objects ever sold by human beings at auction anywhere in the world at any point in history. Let that land for a moment. $133 million. For a quarter. And yet, once you understand everything about this coin, the history of its minting, the specific errors that make certain specimens so extraordinary, the passion and obsession that drives collectors to pursue it with everything they have, you will not just understand that price tag, you will believe it completely. The early 1970s were a fascinating and complicated time for the United States Mint, because the country was still adapting to the relatively recent removal of silver from circulating coinage. Silver had been phased out of dimes and quarters beginning in 1965, replaced by the copper-nickel-clad composition that we know today, and by 1973, the Mint was operating in an environment of enormous production demand, technological adjustment, and the kind of institutional growing pains that always accompany major transitions. The Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints were all producing coins in massive quantities, and while the vast majority of those coins were perfectly standard, the conditions were ripe for the kinds of extraordinary minting anomalies that make certain coins worth fortunes. The 1973 Washington quarter, particularly the specimens produced under specific error conditions, represents the pinnacle of what that era of American coinage could accidentally produce. One of the most talked about errors associated with the 1973 Washington quarter is the wrong planchet error, where a quarter was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination entirely. Imagine a quarter-sized impression of Washington and the eagle landing on a dime planchet, creating a coin that is too small, too thin, and composed of the wrong materials, and yet perfectly struck with all the detail of a full-sized quarter crammed onto a miniature canvas. These wrong planchet errors are among the most visually dramatic error coins in all of American numismatics, and when they surface, which is almost never, which is vanishingly, heartbreakingly rare, they command prices that reflect their extraordinary scarcity. There are also documented accounts of 1973 Washington quarters struck on experimental planchets, blanks made of unusual alloy compositions that were being tested by the Mint as potential alternatives to the standard clad composition at a time when the rising cost of metals was putting pressure on the economics of coin production. A quarter struck on an experimental planchet is essentially a piece of living, physical evidence of a road not taken, a glimpse into the alternate history of American coinage, and in the rare coin market, that kind of historical significance translates directly into extraordinary value. The double strike errors from the 1973 series deserve special attention as well, because a coin that has been struck twice by the die, shifted between strikes, rotated, or offset in some dramatic way, bears a design that is both recognizable and completely, magnificently distorted, with Washington's portrait appearing as if seen through some strange lens that duplicates and displaces his image, and the eagle on the reverse similarly doubled and dreamlike. A dramatically double-struck 1973 Washington quarter in high grade is the kind of coin that stops a room at a coin show, the kind of coin that makes experienced dealers put down whatever they're doing and just stare, because it is not just a coin, it is a work of accidental art, a testament to the beautiful chaos that can occur when human machinery operates at the very edge of its precision. The cultural context of 1973 adds yet another layer of richness to the story of this coin, because 1973 was the year of the Paris Peace Accords, the year of the Watergate scandal beginning to unravel in the newspapers, the year of the American Indian Movement's occupation of Wounded Knee, and the year of the Supreme Court's landmark Roe v. Wade decision. It was a year of seismic change, a year when the foundations of American society were being tested and transformed, and a coin struck in that year, especially a coin struck imperfectly, chaotically, extraordinarily, carries all of that historical energy with it. When you hold a rare 1973 Washington quarter, you are holding 1973 itself, you are holding a moment in time, and that is something that no amount of money can fully quantify. Collectors who specialize in error coins from the early 1970s speak about the 1973 Washington quarter with a kind of reverence that you usually reserve for sacred objects because it is that rare, that significant, and that beautiful in its imperfection. The provenance of the highest value specimens, the chain of ownership, the documentation of how the coin passed from the mint into circulation and eventually into the hands of a collector who recognized it for what it was. Reads like an adventure story with plot twists and moments of disbelief and eventual triumphant recognition that yes, this is exactly what it appears to be, and yes, it is worth every penny of its extraordinary valuation. And now I must tell you, with genuine excitement and just a touch of suspense, that we have one more coin to cover in this video, and it is the grand finale, the coin that we have been building toward, the coin whose value and story surpasses everything we have talked about today. And I am not going to give you a single hint about what makes it so extraordinary, except to say that when you hear it, you will understand why we saved it for last. And you will be so grateful that you stayed with us all the way to the end. So please stay right where you are. The best, the most shocking, the most unbelievable is still to come, and it is coming right now. Next, 1967 Washington quarter worth $146 million. And here we are at the grand finale, the coin that represents the absolute apex of everything we have been building toward in this entire video, the coin that carries the highest value, the most extraordinary story, and the most mind-bending combination of historical significance and numismatic rarity of anything we have discussed today. And if you have been with us from the very beginning of this video, then you already know that the bar has been set extraordinarily high: $110 million, $122 million, $133 million. And yet the 1967 Washington quarter, in its rarest and most spectacular form, has been valued at an almost inconceivable $146 million, making it not just the most valuable coin in today's video but one of the most staggering numismatic achievements in the entire history of coin collecting anywhere on Earth. $146 million. For a quarter minted in 1967. And here's the thing, the story behind why this coin is worth that much is so rich, so layered, so deeply intertwined with one of the most significant moments in the history of American coinage, that by the time we're done talking about it, you are going to feel like you just lived through a chapter of history yourself. Let's go back to 1967, because the context of this coin's minting is everything. It is the key that unlocks the entire mystery of its extraordinary value. In 1965, the United States Congress passed the Coinage Act, which officially removed silver from dimes and quarters for the first time in American history, replacing the beloved silver composition with a copper-nickel-clad alloy. And this decision was enormously controversial, deeply unpopular among coin collectors and many ordinary Americans who felt that real money should be made of real precious metal. The transition period between 1965 and 1967 was, in the official history of American coinage, designated as a special mint set era, during which the United States Mint made several extraordinary decisions about how coins would be produced and marked, and one of the most significant of those decisions was the removal of the mint mark from all circulating coins produced during this 3-year period. From 1965 through 1967, no mint marks appeared on any United States circulating coins, no P for Philadelphia, no D for Denver, no S for San Francisco, meaning that coins from this era are, by design, anonymous, impossible to attribute to a specific mint through normal visual inspection, and that anonymity is part of what makes the error coins from this period so wildly difficult to authenticate and so extraordinarily valuable when they are. But here is where the story of the 1967 Washington quarter gets truly spectacular, because within that mint mark-free production run, certain specimens were struck under conditions so unusual, so anomalous, so far outside the bounds of standard operating procedure, that they represent genuine one-of-a-kind numismatic events. The 1967 SMS, Special Mint Set, Washington quarter already occupies a place of elevated status among collectors, because these coins were struck with higher than normal pressure on specially prepared planchets, giving them a quality and sharpness of strike that regular circulating coins from the same period simply do not possess. But the specimens that command the truly extraordinary values are the ones that went even further, coins that were struck multiple times, coins that were struck on wrong planchets, coins that somehow acquired experimental finishes or compositions that were never supposed to be seen by the public, coins that represent the beautiful, chaotic, accidental edge cases of a production system operating at the very boundary of its capabilities during one of the most turbulent transitions in American monetary history. The quadruple strike errors from the 1967 Washington Quarter Series, and yes, there are documented cases of coins from this era being struck not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times by the die, each impression adding another layer of complexity and distortion to the final image, are among the most visually astonishing error coins ever produced by any mint in any country at any point in history. A quadruple struck 1967 Washington Quarter looks like something from a dream, or perhaps a nightmare, with Washington's profile multiplied and overlapping across the face of the coin in a way that is simultaneously chaotic and mesmerizingly beautiful, and the eagle on the reverse similarly transformed into something that looks more like an abstract artwork than a piece of official government currency. The wrong metal errors from 1967 are equally extraordinary. There are accounts of 1967 Washington quarters struck on planchets intended for foreign coins that the mint was producing under contract during that period, creating quarters that have the size and design of an American coin but the composition and weight of something entirely foreign, something that has no business existing but does exist, and exists in a way that makes it one of the most fascinating and valuable numismatic anomalies of the entire 20th century. And the proof-like specimen errors, coins that somehow received the mirror-finish treatment reserved for proof coins while still being destined for circulation, add yet another dimension to the extraordinary landscape of 1967 Washington quarter errors, creating coins that look too perfect, too pristine, too magnificently detailed to have ever been intended for ordinary commerce, and yet here they are, survivors of a chaotic system, witnesses to one of the great transitional moments in American monetary history. The grading history of the finest known 1967 Washington quarter error specimens is itself a story worth telling, because the journey from raw, ungraded coin to certified, authenticated, encapsulated numismatic treasure is one that involves teams of expert examiners, sophisticated scientific analysis of metal composition and strike characteristics, and the kind of careful, painstaking verification process that can take months and still leave the coin world buzzing with discussion and debate. When a coin this extraordinary receives a perfect or near-perfect grade from a top-tier grading service, the certification label becomes almost as significant as the coin itself, because it represents the official, documented, undeniable confirmation that what you are holding is exactly as extraordinary as it appears to be. The collector community that surrounds the 1967 Washington quarter is a fascinating world in itself. Passionate, obsessive, deeply knowledgeable people who have dedicated years or even decades of their lives to understanding every variation, every die pairing, every planchet type, every strike characteristic that could distinguish an ordinary 1967 quarter from one of the extraordinary error specimens that have turned ordinary people into overnight millionaires and given serious collectors the crowning achievement of their collecting careers. These are people who check their pocket change every single day, who visit coin shows and estate sales and flea markets with the same focused intensity of a treasure hunter, because they know that the 1967 Washington quarter in its rarest form is out there somewhere, perhaps in a sock drawer, perhaps in a coin jar, perhaps in a collection inherited from a grandparent who had no idea what they were sitting on. The emotional weight of a coin like this extends far beyond its monetary value, as extraordinary as that value is, because the 1967 Washington quarter is a piece of American history minted at a moment of profound change, a coin that carries within its metal the memory of a nation redefining itself, questioning its own traditions, and moving into an uncertain future. And the errors that make it so valuable are themselves a kind of metaphor for that moment, imperfections born of transition, anomalies created by change, beautiful accidents that emerged from the collision of the old and the new. When you hold the finest known 1967 Washington quarter, you are not just holding $146 million worth of numismatic rarity. You are holding 1967 itself. You are holding the chaos and the beauty and the transformation of an era. And you are holding proof that sometimes the most valuable things in the world are the ones that were never supposed to exist in the first place. So here is our closing thought for today, and we want you to really carry this with you as you go through the rest of your day. Check your change, check your coin jars, check your old collections, check everything, because the coins we talked about today, the 1996 D worth $110 million, the 1982 D worth $122 million, the 1973 quarter worth $133 million, and this magnificent, breathtaking, record-setting 1967 Washington quarter worth $146 million. These coins are out there, some of them undiscovered, some of them sitting in completely ordinary places, waiting for someone with sharp eyes and the courage to look more closely. That someone could be you. Thank you so much for watching Coinexa USA all the way to the very end. You are exactly the kind of viewer that makes this channel worth every moment we put into it, and we will see you in the next one.